Alright, guys. Welcoming myself back to the podcast, back to Theory and Theology. It's been a bit. I have not recorded on here for a while. I don't even see what the last date was that I posted. I don't even know what the last recording was that I made. I feel like I was talking about skinwalkers at one point. But yeah, I'm glad to see people are gravitating towards this content. I like posting it. I just didn't realize how much other people like listening to it. I have a few pods, and a couple of them I kind of post on every day. Not this one. And, if people are listening, maybe I'll do better at posting more. I just, these topics are a little heavy sometimes, and I don't really know what I'm gonna post. Like, sometimes it's just like if an idea comes to mind, I'll post about it. But it seems like people like the Dolores Cannon type of content, and I noticed that, I found some other content that I hadn't posted regarding Dolores Cannon of some of her content I was reviewing way back. Way back. So apologies if I already posted this, but I couldn't find it, and it looks like I wrote notes, but I remember writing notes and not posting something, so I don't really know. If I just don't know, guys. I don't know. So okay, so I have things broken up here with these symbols and things, but I wanted to talk about one of her episodes. So a Dolores Cannon episode talking about between death and life. Now I haven't even read my own notes on this or rewatched that video, but I'm gonna post her link in the description, as well as, I think that's the only link I have in these notes, so I'm gonna post that link in the description. I guess maybe there were two things I wanted to post about her. I don't know if this is the same topic, but basically I have one that says between death and life, and then another one that says Conscious Living Expo. So maybe it's different, but I don't know. Maybe I'll post them as different because I really don't know. So I guess these are the same. No, they're not the same notes. Sorry, I'm confused. I am confusing myself because I'm barely looking at these notes. So, all right. Between life and death, I guess it talks about this Conscious Living Expo, ideas of control of our own lives and illnesses. And then she starts talking about mind creating illnesses and then mind healing. So this is not going to be a good recollection of kind of what I recall from what she said. But basically, I'm just going to go with my own kind of thoughts and ideas on some of the topics she's presenting here. Because I feel like if you want to listen to what she said exactly, you can go and watch the episode and hear her perspective. But on here, it's like, I wrote notes based on kind of like what questions I had, or what kind of maybe supplemental, like, my understanding of what she was trying to get across, like the main point she was trying to get across. So of those three main points that were discussed in this Conscious Living Expo, about the first topic, ideas of control of our own lives and illnesses. Um, so I don't recall exactly what she was saying about that, but on a pod, there's a pod where I record my daily journey, if you will, of like kind of just like an audio diary, audio journal. Like it's not like very private information or anything, but I don't mind. I post what I don't mind sharing about my day to day, especially because I'm off. Like I figure like might as well kind of document some of what I've been doing, and so yeah, like so basically in this and what I'm gonna say, so sorry, my phone shut off. Sorry. When it comes to ideas of control of our own lives and illnesses, the main thing that comes to my mind is something that I was touching on this morning was, I was raised in a religious background that, contains a health message that, there is scientific proof that people, at least Americans who are following a lot of that lifestyle as far as the health message benefits and kind of like the balanced living, tend to live on average 7 years longer than the average American. So there's some health benefits, at least 7 years worth to it. I know the religion would want to say that, it's God or it's some religious thing, and I can't say if it is or not, like I wouldn't know that. There's some stuff that I could speculate or have my own faith or beliefs around, but I can't say for sure that that doesn't play a role. I do believe in miracles and things that aren't easily explained. I have had experiences that are a little too close to, a little too close to not being random, if that makes sense. Like, I've had plenty of experiences where I'm like, this is not random. This is certainly not random. Like, it doesn't feel random, if you're kind of like having like a thought or like doing like a prayer or something, and then something like immediately happens, like it's like really weird. Like, and I've had enough of those that I'm like, I don't know if this is consequence or if this is just like random, like I don't know. But I never really labeled it as like random, but I wasn't like, oh, I was praying for this thing and a miracle happened. Like, I don't know how to describe it, but it's like, I don't know, like something happened that I feel like might not have happened if I wasn't doing those other kinds of things. So I don't really know. And there's no way to really tell, right? I can't go back and see, and I don't really play with that kind of stuff either because I don't really fully understand it. So I'm not going to keep like testing it and seeing kind of like what happens. But I do believe that I was raised in a way where we did focus on health to some extent, but there were a lot of things that were unhealthy that we just kind of like ignored, like kind of unhealthy social spaces and unhealthy kind of relationships and people with like unhealthy abusive attitudes and things like that, like, or unhealthy sense of shame and just kind of an unhealthy work ethic, workaholic kind of attitudes and things like that. Like, I was raised around some of that stuff too. Some of that was my family, some of it was religion. So there was a healthy amount of balance, but then there was some stuff that I still struggle today that I'm currently trying to balance more because I'm realizing that I hadn't been able to balance that too easily in the past. And so yeah, so dude, what is down there? All these dogs keep stopping, and then Now these crows are like going crazy over here. But anyways, yeah, like, so as far as like controlling our own lives, I was speaking about this with a friend, and they kind of were saying some of their ideas around control are that, we're not really controlled. Most of us aren't really fully controlled. Most of us, um, um, most of us aren't totally controlled. Most of us, um, aren't like bound down or shackled or chained anywhere or locked in any kind of place. Most of us, fortunately, are not. Maybe, unfortunately, some people have been, but most of us are not in those scenarios. Like, a lot of us who are controlled mentally. A good example that's kind of like, sometimes it helps to kind of take it outside of like even like a religious context, because I'm not only specifically talking religion here, but a lot of times these topics go into the space of religion and spirituality. But yeah, one, what was I saying? One area that I would say we could focus on is, at least in Western mainstream society, a lot of us are taught about school, right? I'm not saying, I'm not knocking school, but a common topic lately is, the economy and school, education, careers, jobs. Like, I was probably one of the last generations that was taught, go to school, get a degree, get more than one degree. It helps to keep getting, like, get an associate's, get a bachelor's, get a master's, get a doctorate, get more, get as many as you can. And that the more, degrees you have, you're gonna likely have the most chances for job security, for high income, and for, being able to just kind of settle into one job or one, work company and just work there till you retire. Or maybe, switch careers once or something, but do that until you retire, right? Now, my generation is the generation that was, social media, Facebook, all these kind of things were created during my time frame. And so it's like there are a lot of people that I saw out in the public eye that, we could see through the internet and social media and things, that people were becoming successful in a different route, and they didn't, once you started learning their stories, like Mark Zuckerberg's story and all these other kind of people's life stories about how they got where they're going, it's like, yeah, they weren't, born to wealth, some of them, and, you see people on YouTube able to support themselves. Like, there's this entrepreneurial kind of like, well, I'm going to create this job. There's a line in the movie The Social Network where they say, Harvard students nowadays think it's I don't know what the word is. Like, Harvard students nowadays would rather create a job for themselves rather than going to get a job or something like that. And that was kind of like how things kind of looked then. Like, there was like different sets of thinking of like, I can still do this traditional route and just go to school and do things that way. But now that, people of my generation, my age range, we're in our second recession, where I went through one, towards the end of my first grad school experience, and then here we come again. It's like we've been kind of like knocked down like a couple times now, and it's like, I'm not even 40, you know what I mean? And it's like, when you look at all the milestones that you see people were hitting in the past, where it's like, okay, you're 18, you move out or whatever, and then you get, you go to college for like 4 years, and by the time you're 22, you're able to like start a family and start like getting your first apartment, then getting your first house, and working your way up the ladder at your job, and like getting better pay rates and more perks and all this stuff. And it's like, I don't know a lot of people who have done that. Not that it's not possible, but it's not the only way that people kind of try to do things nowadays. Like, people kind of do what they want to do. Like, I come from a background where education is very highly stressed, and I was never taught that I wasn't going to get a doctorate. Like, that was kind of like, that's the standard, is doctorate or master's, or, like, bachelor's is like what you're supposed to do. Like, bachelor's would be like equivalent to like graduating high school in my family. It's like you're still not done. Like, you're just barely starting with your education. Like, that's kind of because we had the opportunity to do it. All it was is just go to school and get the grades, and you know that was my job, was to go to school and go to school. Like, I didn't have like another, like, I worked a little bit and stuff too, but like, that was my job. Like, my family made it easy for me to focus on school as my primary concern and not have to like focus on paying for an apartment and paying for all these other things. And like, I wasn't very split between like having to do too many things. It was just like study. Like, I had plenty of time to study, so I did, and so that's kind of how I lived most of the time. But I mean, like, nowadays there is this kind of debate of like, you definitely see people going to school, getting into massive debt, and people focus on the debt aspect of a lot of these major, like, these huge corporations that are called universities. And they're a business that, there's some statistics that people say that like, schools have like doubled in price or whatever since like the 80s or whatever. And it's like, yeah, I was born in the early 80s, and now, like, we're coming up on the 80s. I mean, we're coming up on, the cost. Like, even when I first started in community college, it was like, you would go like $7 a unit and like $11 a unit. I remember when it passed like $25 a unit or something like that. I think it went up to 35 or something, but it's like, even a little amount like that, when it's like, I could pay this with my, like, with the gas money that my parents would give me or something. I could pay for this, like, I could pay for this, like, I wasn't getting big paychecks when I was working, but it was like, oh, if I get birthday money, I can pay for my classes, like, the books were like pretty much more expensive than the classes themselves. And so, and textbooks are super expensive too, but you used to be able to get like used textbooks for like almost half the price. You get the paperback used one, and then you're pretty set, or you could just use the ones from the library, even if you checked it out and they had enough copies where you could actually check it out all the time. But yeah, like, I would you know try and yeah, I would try and basically um see kind of what I could maybe, like, I don't know, it was just school. Like, I was going through school, and I just, that's just kind of how I was taught about how to live life, like, and nowadays you don't really see it that much so often. And I think it's a little easier when you don't think religiously about like ideas of control in our own lives and illnesses and things like that. Like, when you think about ideas of control like outside of religion, like, because it can be kind of hard, for people who grew up in a religion to be like, oh yeah, like, they weren't controlling me, like that wasn't a form of control. But when you look at the education system, it's like we were kind of all taught to do it one way, and we kind of had an understanding that if you didn't do it a certain way, you wouldn't have high income opportunities. That was the way to do it. And then there were some other ways, but if you wanted the prestige or whatever that came with it, like, like, trades weren't really pushed too much when I was younger. Like, I know that they existed, but like, at least, in LA, that's not really a thing you hear too much. Even going to the military isn't something you hear too much. Like, I feel like there's some areas where you hear more about, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with trades or military or anything like that, but like, I mean, I don't know, if I had kids, I might, urge them to go towards one or the other. I don't know. Like, I feel like I've seen people have good opportunities out of the military, good opportunities out of, having, been trained in trades, um, for myself, because of the decisions I've made in my own career path. I wouldn't say that my degree has paid off completely financially necessarily. It was rewarding emotionally, socially. I just felt like, it was a place where I could use compassion, and it was just a good environment for me to be in. But I already knew, I was like, there's no way I'm going to be able to do this for the rest of my life. Like, the stress levels, the amount of lack of income increases, and just what I would have to do to kind of get that income increase. I was like, I have other interests. I don't think I really want to only work in mental health forever. So I was like, when I transition out, I'll transition completely out, not just get another job in mental health, but can transition completely out. And eventually I got to the phase where I'm at now, but it's like, when I was talking to my friend, he was bringing it to my attention that, we aren't really fully controlled. We just buy in to something. There's a lot of people who are like, I hated school, I hated, going to school, and, some people hated it for multiple types of reasons. Like, it just didn't appeal to them, or whatever the reason may be, or maybe it was too expensive, or just their minds just didn't work like that. Not that they weren't intelligent and super smart on their own, but this school just wasn't naturally something that they could even get to force themselves to do, or they didn't have a desire to force themselves to do it. I think that some people have a natural inclination towards certain stuff, and I'm one of those people. I have a natural inclination towards not really learning as people are taught to learn in school, but just learning in general. Like, I like to learn. And so at the worst, it's like, well, I'm learning something I don't really care too much about, but at least I'm challenging myself in learning. Just the hardest part was when I wasn't doing too well in things. I never put two and two together, or thought, hey, maybe I should go do something else. Like, in my head, I was like, no, you just do this. This is what you do. I never was flexible with that kind of thinking up until a little more recently, because I was like, oh, well, let me go back to school. And I was like, you know how long it's going to take if I go back and get a doctorate? And I'm like, and the amount of debt, if I want to do it fast, I'm going to have to get in debt to do it fast. And I was like, I really don't want a doctorate. I really don't want to, I mean, I might get one later, but like, I really don't want a doctorate in psychology. I don't really want to be in psychology. Like, why would I go get a doctorate if I'm going to not work in that field right now? So I was like, well, let me just get what I need for the field I want to work in. And so, once I started learning more about boot camps and things, I was like, oh, okay, well, that's one route to go. And like, it's legit. Like, people actually can go. It's like, I've already done the education route, like the formal education route. But yeah, I would say when you look at education, there is a form of control. Like, and it's kind of subtle, but it's like, you kind of see it when you kind of take a step back. Like, somebody was saying, I was listening to this podcast that's called Bad Queers Podcast. And on that podcast, one episode, they were talking about textbook companies, and how most of the textbook companies, I think overall, a lot of books are made by, I don't know if it's called McGraw-Hill or whatever the textbook company is, but even when I was in school, I had textbooks by them, and I think they said it's based in Texas. Don't quote me on any of this, because I don't really know for sure, but basically they were saying most of the textbooks that most schools have are from this company, and they're all based out of one area. And I mean, they're basically pushing agendas. That's why there's certain things we don't learn in school. There's certain things about history that we just never learn. Like, if you're going through like your average curriculum, you're not going to learn certain things. Like, unless you have one of those teachers that's like, off the beaten path, or like one of those kind of like hippie type teachers. Like, I had a lot of those that like, we'd be cleaning up the beach and learning about seals and like all kinds of like animal nature, kind of like learning how to rock climb and water, like white water raft, and like learning about the different plants and like what's edible in this region, and like stuff like that. There's like, yeah, the typical LA school, you don't really get a lot of that, but you know, California, you do have a lot of alternative types of teachers that are very creative. I had a lot of creative types of teachers, and even though I know that ultimately teachers are supposed to be teaching towards like standardized testing, I've definitely had teachers that were like, you could tell that they were not your normal teacher. You're like, whoa, like this teacher is making us do these weird things. It was always cool, but it was like, what are we doing? Like, like, you know, I loved it though. I used to love that kind of stuff, but you could tell, you could just tell when you had one of those teachers. And I had quite a few of those types of teachers, and so it was kind of nice. But um yeah, like if you never had teachers like that, you just had teachers that were likely teaching towards a test, and you basically were getting taught towards a test, and you weren't really getting any other kind of teaching, like and you learned how to take standardized testing, and you did that, and that was basically it. So I would understand if people are like, I didn't like school because most of my teachers were doing that. I mean, that makes sense. Like, there's no like personality to it, you know, there's no depth to it. You're just like, here's a book, and like, I'm gonna tell you what's in the book. Go home and read the book and write some stuff about the book and come back, and we're gonna keep talking about this book. It's kind of like, okay, you know, like, you know, spice it up a little. But I mean, I think we've all had boring classes and stuff that didn't inspire us. And so to me, it does make sense, you know, to say that school is a type of control. Like, if you consider how many hours you're spending there, how much stuff you're learning, and like, there is something to learning critical thinking, learning about all, like, you don't want to maybe not learn about any of this stuff, but I feel like it's excessive. Like, the amount of stuff you learn about that you don't necessarily need. Like, I don't know if any schools, like modern schools in like main cities, that still have like home ec classes. Like, you know, I don't know, like, do you learn how to cook? Do you learn how to clean? Do you learn how to care for your mental health? Do you learn how to like talk about your healthcare insurance and schedule with the doctor and like set up a bank account and budget? Like, do you learn like practical life skills at school? Like, I went through school in a way that I feel like was pretty open-minded for the religion that it was a part of. Like, there was a lot of like, I went to public school too, and like, I was around a diverse amount of people to the point where I feel like I got a pretty decent education, and with my love for learning, I was teaching myself things too and learning on the outside of school too. And it's like, I don't understand, like, you know, how I didn't really learn to budget before college. You know, like, I learned a little bit about it, but I didn't really know how to actually do that kind of stuff. Like, I think my mom taught us how to set up a bank account. Our school didn't teach us that. I remember this one time in like ninth or 10th grade or something, we had these envelopes we had to address to our houses so that our parents could get our I don't know, I guess they were sending like something home to our parents that they had to send by mail. And so this one teacher had us all address our own envelopes, and me and two of the other guys filled them out wrong. And it's like, in a class of 10, 3 people didn't fill it out right. It's not that I'd never written letters or I didn't know. So I misunderstood, and I put my house address and everything kind of like, you know, where it was going in the middle, but I didn't put the top left-hand corner who it was from, like from the school. I didn't put that. I just didn't put it in because I thought maybe they were going to stamp it, or like, you know, or maybe I only heard the teacher say to put your address. Like, maybe I didn't know they wanted us to fully address the envelope. But I put our part in the right spot. The other 2 guys flipped. I guess one of them or both of them flipped the who it's from and who it's to areas of where to put the information. And maybe they both had the same mistake, or maybe they both had different mistakes. But the teacher pointed it out. Like, you guys don't know how to address a letter. And it's like, we were in like high school, you know? And I knew how to address a letter because I used to write letters to my family in Missouri. But these 2, I don't know if they really knew, like, based on the mistakes they made. But whatever, like, 3 of us didn't do it 100% correct. So just practical skills, like back then people used to write letters, like, so it would have made sense to know how to like do it, or writing a check, or that kind of stuff. Like, there's so much that I feel like we did not learn. Like typing, I learned a lot in typing. Math, as bad as I am at math, like as far as like the theory behind it, I'm pretty good with math. Bible, I know a lot about the Bible, and religion and religions in general, and spelling, reading, like I kind of know that stuff. But then there's all these other things that are just like, I don't really know if it was really worth all that time, like focusing on all that other stuff. Like, I know it's good to be well rounded. You don't want to be like completely ignorant about like certain types of topics, but it's like, I don't know. Like, I feel like there's certain stuff that like maybe we should have focused more on, like life skills as well, because we didn't. And even if you have parents that are even as smart and as caring and as thoughtful in raising their kids as mine were, and like attentive and things, like my parents weren't just like completely absent, like they were available, and my mom was usually pretty available. And so like it's kind of odd that like there's certain life skills that we just didn't learn, and even our health class never talked about mental health, like nothing. And so when you think about that whole dynamic where it's like you're learning all this weird stuff that you don't really need, you're learning all this stuff that's not even practical. You can completely come out of high school and not even know how to like basically like do things. Like, when I went to the public school, I found it interesting that by senior year most of my friends were working. In the Adventist school that was not the case, but by senior year most of my high school friends were working after school or before school. They had jobs, they had cars that they paid for themselves, like a lot of them did. And this was normal, this was like I didn't see that at the private school. Like, these kids were a little bit more mature on that end. And so I feel like I was even more behind then, because like I wasn't really expected to learn to drive at 16 or like whatever. Like, I mean, my parents made sure I did it, but like I had plenty of friends that didn't know how to drive even in college, like they had to learn like way later. Like, their parents weren't actively teaching them things that they needed to do. My parents were like, I don't know how the hell my dad decided to get in a car with us and like let us drive in the streets of LA. Like, it's not like I didn't learn to drive in a parking lot, okay? Like, I learned to drive on the street, on the highways, on the freeways, on the freaking residential areas, like as safely as it could be. But we drove in the rain, like we practiced driving, like we actually did hardcore driving. And I honestly never had an accident yet that was my fault. Like, I learned to drive early. Yeah. And so anyways, I do think religion's a form of control. But when it comes to control, I think religion can be a form of control. I think education is a form of control. I think politics is a form of control. But like my friend was saying, like, we're not usually actually controlled, like we look at it as like, oh, like I'm being controlled. But in actuality, we're not actually being controlled necessarily. So there's things like that we can look at and just be like, okay, like when it comes to illnesses, what kind of control do we have? Now, I've been noticing lately how my body responds to the amount of stress that I've been under lately. And I'm not going to go into all of that, but basically it's related to like career stuff and trying to get my health on track and things like that. And just taking this time between jobs to actually, focus on my health so that I don't go into a new job like completely wrecked already. But also it's a push because I'm like trying to hit certain deadlines I've set for myself. So I feel like I'm still kind of struggling with a little bit of stuff like sleep, my mood, just energy and things in general like that. And, I'm setting up doctor's appointments, but they're not like, there's a little bit of back and forth. So it's not too smooth to set those appointments up. And, yeah, so I am not too sure if if we, what are we supposed to do, I'm, not totally sure about things when it comes to like control aspects of things. But yeah, with health, I've noticed my physical health. Um, it's not perfect. It's getting better. Everything's getting better. It's slowly improving. I'm slowly making strides, but it's nothing major. I just didn't want it to become something major. I wasn't trying to have like a heart attack or something. And so I was like, let me just slow down. I've seen a lot of people go through a lot of things when they're approaching 40, especially recently. I've almost lost some friends over, over heart related issues in their 40s. And so I feel like I don't want to go down that route, and I have every opportunity to avoid not going down that route. So let me take it. Um, but yeah, when it comes to um, uh, like illness and control, I've been noticing lately that my energy um and kind of like slight little illness symptoms kind of arise. Like the Sunday before I took my exam on Thursday, my certification exam on the Thursday before I went to Vegas, that was a couple weeks back now. Um, I was feeling a little off, but when you get a cold or flu or whatever, like you usually know, like at least for me, when I get something like that, I know, okay, like I was feeling this way this day, then the next day I felt that way. Then usually it's like my sinuses kick into some kind of issue. And like there's this steady kind of like, pattern for me that it's followed for years. Every time I've gotten the cold, it's been that way. And when I got COVID, it wasn't that way. And then this cold thing that I got more recently, I was kind of telling my mom, I was like, I don't know, like if I'm, sick. This doesn't feel like I'm sick because I still have energy. Like to me, that's always weird. It's like, because whenever I'm actually sick, I get super fatigued, and I wasn't getting fatigued. So I'm like, okay, well, I don't know what's up then. Um, so from there, I basically noticed that I needed to not I don't know. I just my mom was like, well, maybe you're stressed, and then it hit me. I was like, yeah, because I kind of played it off. I'm like, no, I'm not that stressed. And I was like, maybe I am. I am pretty stressed actually, because I was just pushing. And then when I started realizing maybe I'm sick because I'm stressed, and then like the last couple times where I've been stressed or something's come up that's been like distressing for me, I've either had like bad dreams, which isn't normal for me. Like I've had a couple nightmares recently, which isn't a norm. And then I've had a couple other kind of like issues come up. Sorry, this is weird. I'm at the beach and I'm looking, and there's like all these birds in the water. It's kind of crazy. But anyways, I don't know, maybe they're all eating fish. But yeah, I started getting like just kind of working on health and trying to kind of address what I need to do, but I keep getting these little like sinusy issues, or it seems like it's going to be a cold or like a headache, and like little, like a lot of like somatic types of things that like for a while I have not had anything like that happening to me, like for a really long time. And so I'm like, well, it's probably all related to what I'm dealing with lately, because it's not like I'm going out and doing all that much stuff. Like I'm home, I go to the gym, I go to the beach, I kind of run little errands around town and stuff like that. And if I want to interact with my parents, they're always home, they never leave, so I I can do that whenever if I want to. And then if I want to, go do stuff with friends, I'll go do that. And, you know, I'm working on a lot of stuff, like getting streams of income going and things like that. But, yeah, I just find it a little bit interesting. That, I mean, when I think about illness and control, that's kind of what I think about first is like, when it comes to illness and control, the control part, I see that there's all these like systems in place that are kind of like controlling. And then when it comes to illnesses, like, even labeling something as an illness is, I think for some of us, maybe not that clear. Because when I think about it, like, I can describe kind of like how I've lived, most of my life. And when I look back, there's definitely things that I can point to now after having studied psychology for so long and everything. I'm like, oh, like, yeah, I was definitely depressed then, or that was anxiety. I would have these like stomach aches and not be able to go to sleep sometimes and stuff like that. And like, like parents just think, oh, like maybe you just need some Pepto or whatever. Like, but I've always had trouble sleeping. I've always, had periods of time where I was like, I would definitely say I was depressed, but I don't think I knew that I was. And, there was a time before where I used to be able to just sleep way more. And then I got, involved in grad school and all that stuff, and I started sleeping way, way less. So I can do both, but like, I did kind of train myself to a point where, I wake up ridiculously early, and part of me gets proud about that and like, oh, like, yeah, I wake up early, like I don't have trouble waking up early, but I don't have trouble sleep. I do have trouble sleeping in, and I don't have, an easy time falling asleep. And so, just because I'm waking up early, it seems like, culturally it's like more productive seeming, even though you can be productive and wake up at noon, you know what I mean? But it just the appearance of it, waking up at noon seems lazy, maybe because it seems easier to do. Waking up in the morning isn't easy. Like, I'm not waking up like chipper and like super happy every day. Like, it's rare that I wake up and I'm like in a super great mood, like right off the bat. But, yeah, I kind of wonder, it's, I get a little bit curious about, when it comes to, illnesses and how people manage them and stuff, like how much is related to stress. Because we can kind of induce a lot of it. Like, I know I can. I'm barely able to like figure out that that's what it is. Like, when I was in grad school, I could tell I'm stressed, and this way that I'm feeling is because of my stress. But now it's like, it's not that kind of thing. It's not like stomach aches or headaches or just like fatigue. It's more like irritability and just inability to really sleep good and waking up too early and like getting these weird cold symptoms. Like, it's change, like I used to kind of understand it better, and then I think I just ignored it for a really long time. I was like, whatever, like I'm just gonna ignore this. And now I'm kind of back where I'm like trying to pay attention to it more. But I definitely don't think that I'm meeting criteria for a diagnosis of some specific types of colds or flus or anything like that. It's something else, and the only thing I can think of is all these changes I'm making that have to do with my career change and all this other kind of stuff. Like, I'm pretty sure that's what's going on. I don't think I'm actually sick, because it just comes and goes so quick sometimes, and it's like, and it's not normal, and no one in my family's getting it, and it's not like I don't feel contagious. It's just like, not that you can like feel contagious, but like it doesn't feel like a normal cold is what I'm trying to say. Now, as far as things being contagious and getting them, I don't have any personal experiences knowing about getting sick or not getting sick from actual contagious illnesses. I have had experiences with pain where I felt like I've had control over it. menstrual cramps are one of those things. Like, like sometimes I feel like I'm able to kind of like decrease them. And I've known when I've been at the most some of the most stressful periods of my life. I guess no pun intended, but some of the most stressful times in my life, my menstrual pain has been a lot like worse than ever. And so, I mean, there's got to be something relevant there too. Um, but like I don't know. It's hard stuff to explain because it's like a lot of times I'm just going through my days and just like busy, and a lot of this stuff is kind of hard to just explain and be like, oh, this is what's happening. Because it takes when I'm like reflecting on things to like think about it and be like, oh, like is that what was going on, or is it this? Like we're usually taught, a way to kind of like just avoid that kind of stuff, right? Like it's just like something that happens and you don't really go back to it. Or like think about why, you're just like, oh, I was sick, or oh, I was stressed, and you just like move on. Um, as far as mind creating illnesses and mind healing, so the mind can definitely create illnesses. I've done it before. I'm not saying that everyone who has an illness is creating it on purpose or anything, but I remember once I did for 2 days. I don't know why I did this. But I started noticing, because I have like this sensitivity towards things. I started noticing, I guess, like what it feels like to be really down and sad and like depressed. And I just purposely just forced myself to like think about things that would make me cry, and just I didn't want to get up, I didn't want to eat, I did this on purpose. Like I was like, okay, I can take myself out of this at any time. But I did it one day, and then I remember waking up the next day and being like, I'm going to do that again to see if I can do it again. And it was miserable, it sucked. I haven't done that again since, and I probably won't, but I was like, it was really easy to force myself to feel down. Like that was simple. Like I could do that in a heartbeat. I don't really easily do it with feeling good. I don't think that I purposely take my mind there to make myself feel bad, but I try to remember experiences like that when I am feeling bad, where I'm like, I know I'm not feeling great, but I'm trying to pay attention to when I need to feel it, and when I need to kind of like, if I have to, just force myself to feel better. Because I don't often practice like feeling way better immediately, or like forcing myself to like a light, like happy space. Like, but that was interesting for me when I did that. And it was a while back, like I was quite a bit younger. And it was a pretty intense experience. I would not recommend it. Like but I was a little fascinated with it. It was more like, wow, like, it was just like I was playing with my own like emotional state, and it was just, I don't know, part of me liked it. Like I was like, wow, like it was kind of a powerful experience, even though I wouldn't say that I've become like super skilled at like forcing my emotions one way or the other, like, but it was part of me like, okay, like I was able to test this and prove that I can make myself really sad, on purpose, like for days if I wanted to, on the spot, and then pull myself out of it, Now, I mean, like, I don't really know. Like, it's really hard to explain, and I don't want to do it again. I don't think it's necessarily healthy to do that. I don't really know. Like, I've never learned about doing something like that on your own, or heard anybody say that you should do something like that, or even recommended it. But it almost reminds me of kind of why I get so interested in things like plant medicine, psychedelics, different things like that, because it's like I like something that like, oh, this just you can just have this and it'll kind of like change that for you temporarily, and like then you can go back without it. And maybe you'll feel benefits for a long time or whatever. You'll feel the effects for a long time. Um, I'm interested in that, and also interested in the fact that I can do it to myself. But yeah, I don't play with that. I did at that time. I don't plan on playing around with that again. That was a little too much. But I'd say if I can do it, and I'm not like super uh, like understanding of what I'm even doing, especially then I didn't really know what I was doing. Um, but I felt and sensed how to do it and just kind of figured it out on my own one day and realized that this isn't something that I want to keep doing. But for that reason, I would say I'm probably not the only one who knows how to do that. Um, I just don't do it, and I do find it easier. Like there's almost any time where I could almost just like flip the switch. Like I could feel it a lot of the time where I'm like, oh, I could flip the switch into that mode right now if I want. I could do it right now if I wanted to. Like I won't, but it's like I could. Versus making myself feel like super happy and joyful. Like I'm not saying I'm not happy or joyful, but making myself feel like super like giddy and like, or whatever, like I don't think I could flip that switch too easily. But the other one I can. And so it's kind of interesting. I can tune into it really quickly. And I don't know, like I don't know. I don't want to go into it, but basically, yeah. And when it comes to mind healing, that's the last part I'll talk about for this one because we're gonna run out of time. When it comes to mind healing, I mean, I know a lot of the time. I want to be careful with how I say this, but I know a lot of the time we equate happiness with with being good or doing good, and healing with, okay, if I'm healed, that means that I feel good. If I've experienced healing, that's a positive thing, and that means that I feel good because I've been healed. You know what I mean? Like we kind of think about healing in that way. People wouldn't necessarily say that healing is negative. Healing is always seen as positive, and with it being seen as positive, usually there's less pain associated with it. But I think healing, like the process of healing and actually being healed, those are two specific things. When I'm thinking of it, that's how I am kind of currently seeing it, is that, you know, um, being healed is a phase that could be permanent, and for that time it could be permanent for that time. It's maybe not always permanent, but it could be permanent for that time. And it's not always, like, I guess what I would say is, say if somebody has a broken arm, a broken leg, and depression and anxiety. It's like, say, if I just make it simple, let's just talk about it like it's easy stuff, right? If your arm heals, technically it's healed, but, there could be some complications later, or something about it where it's like, it's not 100% better. Like you could maybe still have a risk of injuring it more heavily. Like I've heard that when you break a bone, like it grows back stronger, but I don't know, maybe something else happens. Like I don't know. Like, so what I guess I'm trying to say is, like, you can heal physically, something could get healed and that's done being healed, but it's like, it doesn't mean that there's no scars or any, like, damage from the healing process. And then say your arm heals and then your leg is broken, it stays unhealed longer, but then eventually it gets healed. And so you would say, okay, now I no longer have any physical things that need to get healed, technically, at that point. Let's just say those were the only two. But then you still have other things that need healing, like the depression and the anxiety. And so then you go in and, you're working on those, and it's like, maybe it's back and forth. Like, the anxiety gets healed, and then, you know, eventually the depression gets healed, and then maybe something else happens and you get more anxiety, and like maybe it gets more severe than like generalized anxiety and becomes like panic attacks or something. And, you know, then you start having to deal with that, but it's like then that gets healed. So it's kind of like, I feel like the healing process can be different. You can have different things getting healed at different times, and they're healed, but maybe along the process, maybe there was a lot of pain too, and that pain can be impactful in a good way or a bad way. Like sometimes, you know, the healing process sometimes I think can be a little bit scary, traumatic in an interesting way. Like I don't know if traumatic is the right word, but like kind of traumatic. Like like intrusive, and just like a strongly uncomfortable experience that's maybe not fully positive all the time. It brings up a lot of stuff. It opens the doors to some other things, and maybe ultimately it's helpful, but maybe like during the time, you know, it's like, wow, that might still cause a little bit of scarring, physically or emotionally. I'm not just talking like physical types of pain and stuff, but yeah, that's why I would say that, you know, there is healing, you know, and your mind can heal. It can heal you, you know, it can it could, like, you can kind of heal yourself. I'm not saying don't go to doctors or anything like that, but it's like, yeah, I think people can heal themselves too. So, I don't know. Like with that, I feel like that's kind of all I really have to say about those things. But yeah, like if you can come across Dolores Cannon's episodes, I'm gonna post the links in the description. I wrote this sometime in like March, and it's May now, so I don't even know like where I was initially trying to go with this. But there's still more. I didn't finish everything, so there's still more here, and I'll probably slowly go through it. But yeah, it's getting a little later in the afternoon. With that, I'm gonna go grab some lunch and get going. So with that, thanks for listening.